Are you motivated or are you committed? That's the challenge in Atlanta real estate today. Buyers are neither. And that's what we're talking about today. Hi, I'm Deborah Morton with Inside Georgia Real Estate, and we're here to talk about all things real estate related in the Georgia market. Thanks for joining us. Send us your questions on InsideGeorgiaRealEstate.com. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and listen on all the places you enjoy your favorite podcasts. Today we're talking about motivation and commitment to buying. In the Atlanta market currently, right now, it is June 2026, normally the busiest time of year. And I'll say, we are busy, we are working, but there are fewer transactions closing because we're seeing a situation because of the affordability issues, the economy, mortgage rates. It's the perfect storm. What we're going to talk about today is buyer motivation and commitment, because a lot of people think I would like to move and they're browsing. They're browsing online. We can see the data. We know what's happening online. They're looking. They're showing up at open houses. They want to go see houses and dream about buying. We are doing showings. We have people that we're meeting with that think they want to buy a home, but they're not really pulling the trigger as fast or as easily, or they're second guessing themselves. So today we're going to break down what commitment means from a buyer who's buying, and then we're going to talk about it from the seller's perspective as well, because it is hard for a seller to understand why no one's buying their home. So in a buyer's journey, there's a couple of phases they go through. First, they're exploring the idea, like, oh, maybe I'm thinking about moving. And as that thought progresses, they get a little bit more serious, and we start seeing signs like, buying a home might be in my near future. I don't know exactly when. And then they show up at open houses. That's why we have open houses, to give buyers an opportunity without pressure to see homes. They're exploring ideas. In the buyer journey, that is a normal part. They go from online browsing to sending online inquiries to showing up at open houses. They're gathering information. They are doing this oftentimes before they contact an agent to represent them. They might not be ready yet. So when we have a listing, a homeowner says, yes, let's do an open house, I don't ever want our homeowners, our sellers, to think that that open house is necessarily going to sell the house that day. But what it does do, sometimes it does, but what it does do is give buyers an opportunity without pressure or obligation to explore their options. But once a buyer really does, so now we know they're motivated. We've got the motivation. Why does a buyer want to move? Lots of different reasons behind that. What we want to do is find the buyers who are not only motivated to move. Let's talk a little bit about buyer motivation. What motivates someone to buy a home, to make a move? Because we all know it's expensive and it's hard. Packing and moving is a hassle, and you have to really want to move to make yourself do the work. So what prompts a buyer? Oftentimes it's a life change. It's a change in state. They have graduated college. They have a good job. Now they're ready to make that step into adulthood. They might have been in their parents' basement for a long time, saving money. Now they're ready to step out on their own. Other life changes would be, we're in a home, we have our family has grown. You've gone from no children to one child, or one child to 3 children. All of those things, why people move. 22.5 million people experience big life changes every 2 years. That's just the cycle of life. And what happens is your life changes and you move. Job change, death and divorce. Those are the things that people don't like to talk about, but when a death in a family happens, a move is necessary. A divorce happens, then it's really necessary. All of these are life situations that create a level of motivation for someone to move. There are lots of people who want to move. They want a bigger house, they want a nicer house, they want a different neighborhood, they want a different lifestyle. So inventory has been rising for 4 straight years, and that impacts buyers' options. So their level of motivation is tied to their options. When there are no options in houses out there, they have to compete hard. And that's when we saw prices going up, and it was hard. They had to have a compelling reason to make a move to compete. Now we're seeing more options. Rising inventory have given buyers more options. But the expense we're seeing, the affordability factor, means a buyer still has to have a high level of motivation to go through the hassle of moving. A lot of buyers right now are evaluating, do I just continue renting or do I go ahead and purchase? We know there is a cost to waiting. There are calculators we can prove where your net worth is significantly impacted every year you wait to buy. But sometimes that's not enough of a motivating factor. So motivation matters. If you're buying a home, one of the first questions we're going to talk about in our buyer consultation when we meet for the first time is what's prompting you to make a move. It helps us understand how hard to push or how gently to guide. We can do it all. We can move at a head-spinningly fast pace. If a divorce is imminent and you need to find a home and move, we can help you do that very quickly. If you are safely ensconced in your parents' basement, have a great job, and you're saving money by the bucket, that's great. We can take our time and find the very perfect house for you when the time comes. Different levels of motivation. Important factor for everybody to understand and to talk about. And let's get clear about it. When we meet with you, let's have some honest conversations about what's going on in your life and what your end goals are. Most people don't buy their first home as their forever home. It really very, very rarely happens because most buyers, what they can afford and what they are capable of getting in the early stages of their life journey doesn't match what they want or need in the latter stages of their life journey. There is very smart reasons to go ahead and buy and let appreciation grow your net worth, grow your equity, and use that money to pour into your next stage. But I'm getting off topic. Let's get back to the two things we're talking about today. Buyer's motivation matters in going through the buying journey. So we have buyer's motivation, and then we have to determine their commitment to the process. Both have to be aligned for a purchase to happen. And in 2026, we know that we have motivated buyers. They want to make a move, but they get into the process and we find they're not committed to it. And the reason for that is cost. It's a hassle, it's expensive, and it's stressful. A lot of buyers are starting the process right now, and we're seeing contract terminations at the highest rate we've ever seen, over 30%. 1 in 3 contracts is terminating right now. And the reason for it is because the buyers are not as committed, and the sellers and buyers both are not committed enough to making things work. It requires a level of negotiation and working with one another to make it happen. The buyer has to be committed to seeing it through the process because it's expensive and things pop up. In our last episode, we talked about costs. Costs are the most significant factor that are keeping buyers committed to moving forward. They get into the process, they either haven't been properly advised or there were unforeseen costs that were not expected, and they get scared and they roll back. Fear is the #1 reason we see people failing to commit to moving forward. Sellers need certainty when they receive a contract to know that this buyer is committed to the transaction. When we can provide a contract and an environment where the seller is committed to selling the home and the buyer is committed to buying the home, bringing these two parties together, understanding they both have interests that need to be heard and work out the details, that's what makes a transaction complete. A complete transaction happens when everybody's working together. And for that to happen, we have to have two parties who are committed. When there is plenty of inventory, plenty of options out there for a buyer to go choose, oftentimes when a seller doesn't want to negotiate, they're not compelled to work with the buyer, the buyer just chooses to go find a different house. And in some cases, they're deciding, you know what? I don't want to buy a house at all. And that's a sad thing because it will impact their net worth long term. In a market where we have rising inventory, plenty of homes for a buyer to look at, this is where the buyer's motivation and commitment to moving forward, sellers need to be conscious of what's happening in the buyer's journey. Most sellers haven't moved in at least 5 to 7 years, and oftentimes it's more than that. 10 to 15 years was the last time they made a move. And they forget what that buyer's emotional journey is through the process. So not only has the buyer gone through the mental process of calculating what they can afford, what they're willing, what they want, then we start looking at houses. And in that process, oftentimes we have two people, husband, wife, partners in life, that have to agree on things. So funny story, while we're out, what I'm doing is I'm evaluating, your buyer's agent is evaluating what both parties in the transaction, what matters to one might not matter to the other, and vice versa. That's important to understand. Your agent has to be a little bit of a psychologist in this process to understand that what is most important, the top 3 things to one partner might not be the top 3 things on the other. And we have to find a home that blends it all together. And once we have both partners on the same page with what their priority, somebody's giving, somebody's taking, there's a give and take here through the whole process. There's the must-haves, the want-to-haves, the it would be nice to have features in a home. And I have to say, rarely are two people completely lockstep with what their needs and wants are. So as we're going through this buyer journey, looking at houses, we know they want to make a move, and sometimes they have to make a move. Then we have to find a home that they're both committed to moving forward, because this is where the obstacles happen. You put forth an offer, and the seller, the homeowners, live there forever, and they think their home is fine. You know, one of my clients used a funny phrase recently, and he said, you know, nobody admits that they have the ugly baby. And this is true with homeowners. Homeowners oftentimes don't see the warts on the house. They don't see that their choice for decor, their choice for improvements or lack of improvements as the way a buyer sees it. This is why we developed the home report card that is a tool. It's a free tool available for homeowners to go through the checklist, looking at their home through a buyer's eyes, from curb appeal to roof to foundation and everything in between, so that you carefully go through your home and understand what a buyer is seeing and how they're seeing it. It's not just about taste, it's about value. And if a buyer doesn't see the value in the features of a home, we might not be able to get them to agree to move forward or to commit to the transaction. And what that would look like is, recently we had a situation where husband and wife looking at a home, it's a lovely home, they're talking about price and value. Is this home overpriced? And if you're selling a home, you need to understand that's a conversation every single buyer goes through. Is this home worth what you're asking for it? In that conversation, what the wife valued and what the husband valued were not the same. Where the husband thought that the money that homeowner put into hardscaping the backyard, professional landscaping, fire pit, covered patio, all of these were features that he valued. He thought they were worth the money to move forward. However, the wife was not an outdoorsy person and did not care that the homeowner invested, I'm guessing the homeowner invested $100,000 in outdoor hardscaping, portico, like very, very lovely backyard features, upgraded from what the neighbors had. But because that didn't matter to the wife, she was not committed to paying the price. These are all the factors that go into every conversation with every buyer as they move through their buying journey. And if you're selling a home, you need to be conscious of it. It does not mean that backyard investment was not worth it. But it might not be worth it to this buyer, and we might need to bring a different buyer who does value it and is willing to pay for it. Or the seller might have to wrap their head around the fact that the buyer is not going to pay the $100,000 that you invested in that. This is just part of the journey. It's not personal. It is just how the process works. And my goal here is to educate and inform and hopefully entertain a little bit what goes on behind the scenes in real estate here in Georgia. I'm Deborah Morton with Inside Georgia Real Estate. Reach out to us at InsideGeorgiaRealEstate.com. Send us your questions, your comments. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and where all your favorite podcasts are listened to.